On today's video, we're going to talk about the Volvo 240 and why it's a pretty awesome car. We don't have a stereo, but we do have a Bluetooth speaker. This is pretty much a requirement. If you have a shit box, you have to have a Bluetooth speaker. But we actually do have a 12-volt power source, which is a step up from some shit boxes. Let's go for a small ride. I'll give you some reasons why I think that this is like one of the coolest chassis you can get for a project vehicle, in my humble opinion. As you can probably hear, it sounds like a tugboat. I should really be wearing a lav, but I'm doing this in kind of a rush because we're actually selling this car today. I'm selling it because I really haven't driven it in months. I have a work vehicle and I also bought the F-150, so this car doesn't really serve a purpose anymore. It's a cool car to put around in, but I have cars that are cooler. I have the Skyline, I have the 620. If I was driving somewhere where I needed to parallel park and I didn't want to park a car that I care about, I'd probably take this. Not that I don't care about this car, I actually really like this car. It's just that I don't have as much time and money invested as the other cars. And on top of that, this thing is a tank. These are known for being super safe. Volvo was really ahead of the game on safety. Pretty much anybody that was concerned about safety in the 70s and 80s, they would buy a Volvo 240. So today we're actually going to be selling this to an internet friend. He also appreciates a nice Volvo. I'm not sure what his plans for the Volvo are going to be, but I'm sure he'll do something nice to it. You can get this chassis in a coupe, a sedan, or the wagon. The wagon's obviously the best choice. It looks the coolest. It gives you the most room for just throwing anything you want back there. You can sleep in it if you need to. You can also get a third row tumbler seat, which I'm sure if you were watching this video, you probably watched Ginjum's video where he did a bunch of pulls with his LS swapped 240. That video was pretty entertaining, but there's no way you could get me in the back of that thing. Which brings me to my next point, is that this car is super swap friendly. There's a lot of room between the strut towers. You can pretty much throw anything you want in here. I've seen a Coyote swap 240. The Aussies have done Barras. There's been a ton of LS swapped ones in the States. And from what I understand, the chassis can take it. A lot of the swapped cars that I mentioned aren't caged. It's just the factory 240 chassis, and it holds up pretty well. So this car does have four-wheel disc brakes, which is pretty crazy to think about because in the same time period that this car came out, Ford was still putting drum brakes on the back of their Ford Mustangs, and it was still 4-lug. This is 5-lug, disc brakes, pretty decent rear, and the suspension setup's actually pretty similar to a Mustang. That's why I was going to try to put an air suspension kit on this at one point. I was going to take Leo's S197 kit and try to adapt it to the front struts for this. And with the spring pocket in the rear, you can just tuck a couple bags in there and it's fine. A couple little things to note, this car was made in Gothenburg, Sweden. So if you're a goth, you can't get anything more goth than something that was made in Gothenburg. I don't know if goths actually like 240s, but hipsters love them. Maybe there's somebody out there who's a hipster goth, and then this would be the perfect car for you. These cars don't require a lot of maintenance. All they really need is gas and oil, maybe some trans fluid because stuff leaks out. This one's definitely leaky. It's leaked all over my driveway for the last 4 years. I'm sure it's marked its territory in Baltimore City and also at BWI International Airport. I used to fly out of town for work a lot, and I would always take this because if this was in a parking lot, I could kind of rely on it being safe. But this was also my daily for a little while when I was driving from Harford County, Maryland to Silver Spring, which is about an hour drive one way, and it was dependable. Fuel economy was decent. Definitely not as economical as some other options. It's not a hybrid, but it did well, and it was always dependable. If you have one of these, you can't rely on breaking down as an excuse to get out of work. It's just not going to happen. So I've had this car for 4 years, put some decent miles on it. I did hydraulic struts in the back for the hatch, some oil changes. The odometer doesn't work, so I just kind of guessed when to change the oil. Maybe a light bulb here and there. And also the overdrive on the transmission, there's a solenoid block-off plate. I did put that on because this car didn't have overdrive when I first got it. It only had 3 speeds. But that plate was like a $20 mod. It means you can't shut off the overdrive anymore, but I don't know why you would really need that driving around. I haven't washed this car. I haven't cleaned the interior, hardly. It's just been a solid, dependable car, and I really hate to see it go, but I just have too much stuff. And I just feel like I'm getting old, and I don't have much time to mess with stuff. Like if I didn't have a full-time job, I would definitely keep this for another project car. YouTube just something on the side, obviously. Day job takes all my time and energy, so I don't have enough time and energy and money to work on this on top of the Skyline and the 2011 Mustang and the 620 and the Fox Body and the 65 Para and the 240Z and some other cars that I'm messing with that I haven't even talked about yet. This is definitely one of the coolest cars in the fleet. If I drive this to Walmart or to a liquor store or Walgreens, there's a good chance that there's going to be somebody outside either waiting for me or just walking by, and they'll say that they really like this car. Sometimes it's because of all the hipster stickers on the back. Other times it's just because you don't see these around and people have 240 stories. But it's definitely a car with a lot of character. I feel like this is gonna kind of feel like when you dump a girl or a guy that you're dating and you think it's for the best, but then you start to miss them and then you see them with somebody else and then you get kind of jealous and then you know it's something that you can't experience anymore. I feel like it's going to be like that. But if cars are girlfriends, I have a lot of girlfriends, like too many. I'm like a pimp, but like an ethical pimp. I don't slap my cars around. Well, maybe the 2011 a little bit. But I just feel like this girl should go to somebody else, somebody who can really give her love and affection and give her the attention that she needs and the attention that she deserves. Yeah, I really feel bad about this one, but also feel good about it, you know? Miss it. And it's been a good car. It's been a great 4 years, but it's time to say goodbye. It's not to say that I didn't have good times in this car. We went on a lot of adventures together, and I even took this car to Radwood last year because the Skyline was out of commission, and it did pretty well for an old beater. I heard a story recently about Kurt Cobain of Nirvana. I guess it was part of the conspiracy about how he didn't kill himself. There's a story that some company gave him a car. Might have been like a Mercedes or like a Rolls, something really nice and foreign. And apparently he didn't drive that car much because he wanted to drive the 240 that he had because the 240 was safer. That's a pretty interesting thing to think about. He was worried about safety. Why would he kill himself? I don't know. I can't really think offhand of any other celebrities who own these, but you do see Volvo 240s in the backgrounds of movies and TV shows. The most recent 240 spotting that I spotted was in Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a great movie if you have an attention span for trippy stuff. Volvo made like 3 million of these cars in this chassis, but every time I see one I feel like it's a nice little treat. I definitely break my neck to look at it. There's not a lot of these around anymore. I think Cash for Clunkers got rid of a lot of them, which sucks because they last forever. A lot of times when I roll through an older neighborhood, I'll see them. Seems like a lot of old people kept them around. And then the younger generations who are buying them, I do see them at Radwood. Then like I said, all the people that swap them. This would definitely be a good candidate for an LS swap, but just no time, no money. On top of the chassis being really solid, they're also relatively lightweight. I was taking some old batteries to the scrapyard one day, and I think that this thing rolled over the scales at 3,400 pounds, and that was with some stuff in it, like some heavy batteries. Definitely not as heavy as everybody thinks, being that this is a tank. Newer cars are just so heavy compared to older stuff. It's built solid, it's safe, but it doesn't have all those electronics and I guess sound deadening like a newer car. I'm not sure really why new cars are so heavy compared to this. You would think that this weighs more than an S550 Mustang, but this is significantly lighter than an S550 Mustang. Handling is kind of decent. These shocks are probably blown out. This is a slow car, but it's funner to drive a slow car fast than it is a fast car slow. I think Abraham Lincoln said that. These were used in a lot of different race series like Rally and I think Australian Supercar. Not the wagon version, obviously. I think the coupes were what was used, but they definitely had some race pedigree to them, which is crazy to think about because it's just a brick on wheels. It's not very aerodynamic, but they just really nailed it with the handling and how solid the chassis is. You also have a ton of angle from the factory. I mean, compared to other cars, I mean, it's stock angle. Pretty angly. Power for the Volvo 240s came from the 2.3 liter, I think this is a B230, at least that's what the block said when I was changing the oil. In stock form, it's definitely not the most powerful thing I've ever driven. In fact, this is probably the second slowest car I've ever owned, only behind the original Datsun 620 that I had. That thing was super slow. But in turbo form, they put out some pretty decent horsepower. I've seen people drift those cars. I think this only made like 100-ish horsepower from the factory, and that was back in 1989. So today it probably makes, I don't know, 80. Kind of sounds cool, but it's not fast. 0 to 60 eventually. This car would also be a lot more fun if it had a manual, but there's no manual. There was a manual option. If this was a manual wagon, I wouldn't be selling it. You can swap them pretty easy, but I just don't have the time and the money. I'd rather manual swap the 620 if I'm being honest.
There's a message in my alphabet. It says, ooh.
Really hoping this video doesn't get a ton of views, because then I'll regret selling this thing even more. But that is going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. It was nice driving this thing one last time. This car is going to be going, but I'm going to be concentrating on the 2011 with drifting this year, and the 620 and the Skyline. Stay tuned for all that. If you're into that kind of thing, maybe consider subscribing if you want to. Or if you don't want to, that's fine. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. But if you watch these videos, I can afford to keep vehicles like this. With just 10,000 views a day, I can support my shit car habit. But yeah, have a fantastic day, and I will see you soon. Bye, Volvo. I miss you.